On July 29th in the year 1588, 80 of course, off the coast of Gravelines, France, Spain's so-called Invincible Armada is defeated by an English naval force under the command of Lord Charles Howard and Sir Francis Drake. After 8 hours of furious fighting, a change in wind direction prompted the Spanish to break off from the battle and retreat towards the North Sea. Its hopes of invasion crushed. The remnants of the Spanish Armada began a long and difficult journey back to Spain. In the late 1580s, English raids against Spanish commerce and Queen Elizabeth I's support of the Dutch rebels in the Spanish Netherlands led King Philip II of Spain to plan the conquest of England. Pope Sixtus V gave his blessing to what was called the Enterprise of England, which he hoped would bring the Protestant Isle back into the fold of Rome. A giant Spanish invasion fleet was completed by 1587, but Sir Francis Drake's daring raid on the Armada's supply in the port of Cadiz delayed the Armada's departure until May 1588. On May 19th, the Invincible Armada set sail from Lisbon, Portugal, on a mission to secure control of the English Channel and transport a Spanish army to the British Isle from Flanders. The fleet was under the command of the Duke of Medina Sidonia and consisted of 130 ships carrying 2,500 guns, 8,000 seamen, and almost 20,000 soldiers. The Spanish ships were slower and less well armed than their English counterparts, but they planned to force boarding actions if the English offered battle, and the superior Spanish infantry would undoubtedly prevail. Delayed by storms that temporarily forced it back to Spain, the Armada did not reach the southern coast of England until July 19th. By that time, the British were ready. On the 21st of July, the English naval began bombarding the 7-mile-long line of Spanish ships from a safe distance, taking full advantage of their long-range heavy guns. The Spanish Armada continued to advance during the next few days, but its ranks were thinned by the English assault. On July 27, the Armada anchored in exposed position off Calais, France, and the Spanish army prepared to embark from Flanders. Without control of the channel, however, their passage to England would be impossible. Just after midnight on July 29th, the English sent 8 burning ships into the crowded harbor at Calais. The panicked Spanish ships were forced to cut their anchors and sail out to sea to avoid catching fire. The disorganized fleet, completely out of formation, was attacked by the English off Gravelines at dawn. In a decisive battle, the superior English guns won the day, and the devastated Armada was forced to retreat north to Scotland. The English Navy pursued the Spanish as far as Scotland and then turned back for want of supplies. Battered by storms and suffering from a dire lack of supplies, the Armada sailed on a hard journey back to Spain around Scotland and Ireland. Some of the damaged ships foundered in the sea while others were driven onto the coast of Ireland and wrecked. By the time the last of the surviving fleet reached Spain in October, half of the original Armada was lost and some 15,000 men had continued their eternity. Queen Elizabeth's decisive defeat of the Invincible Armada made England a world-class power and introduced effective long-range weapons into naval warfare for the first time, ending the era of boarding and close-quarter fighting. On July 29th in 1862, Confederate spy Marie Isabella Belle Boyd is arrested by Union troops and detained at the old Capitol Prison in Washington, D.C. It was the first of 3 arrests for this skilled spy who provided crucial information to the Confederates during the war. The Virginia-born Belle Boyd was just 17 when the war began. She was from a prominent slaveholding family in Martinsburg, Virginia, which is now West Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley. In 1861, she shot a Union soldier for insulting her mother and threatening to search their house. Union officers investigated and decided the shooting was justified. Soon after the shooting incident, Boyd began spying for the Confederacy. She used her charms to engage Union soldiers and officers in conversations and acquire information about federal military affairs. Suspecting her of spying, Union officers banished Boyd further south in the Shenandoah to Front Royal, Virginia in March 1862. Just 2 months later, Boyd personally delivered crucial information to General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson during his campaign in the Valley that allowed the Confederates to defeat General Nathaniel Banks' forces at the Battle of Winchester. In another incident, Boyd turned 2 chivalrous Union cavalrymen who had escorted her back home across Union lines over to Confederate pickets as prisoners of war. Boyd was detained on several occasions, and on July 29th, she was placed in the old Capitol Prison in Washington. But her incarceration was evidently of limited hardship. She was given many special considerations, and she became engaged to a fellow prisoner. Upon her release 1 month later, she was given a trousseau by the prison superintendent and shipped under a flag of truce to Richmond, Virginia. Boyd was arrested again in 1863 and held for 3 months. After this second imprisonment, she became a courier of secret messages to Great Britain. In 1864, her ship was captured off the coast of North Carolina, and the ship and crew were taken to New York. Captain Samuel Hardinge commanded the Union ship that captured Boyd's vessel, and the two were seen shopping together in New York. He followed her to London, and they were married soon after. The obviously attractive Marie Isabella Belle Boyd was widowed soon after the end of the war, but the Union produced 1 child. Still just 21, Boyd paralleled her spying experiences into a book and an acting career. She continued her eternity in Wisconsin in 1900. On July 29th in 1909, the newly formed General Motors Corporation acquires the country's leading luxury automaker, the Cadillac Automobile Company, for the price of $4.5 million. Cadillac was founded out of the ruins of automotive pioneer Henry Ford's second failed company. His third effort, the Ford Motor Company, finally succeeded. When the shareholders of the defunct Henry Ford Company called in Detroit machinist Henry Leland to assess the company's assets for their planned sale, Leland convinced them to stay in business. His idea was to combine Ford's latest chassis with a single-cylinder engine developed by Oldsmobile, another early automaker. To that end, the Cadillac Car Company, named so for the French explorer Antoine Lemaitre de la Mothe Cadillac, who founded the city of Detroit in 1701, was founded in August of 1902. Leland introduced the first Cadillac priced at $850 at the New York Auto Show that following year. In its first year of production, Cadillac put out nearly 2,500 cars, a huge number at the time. Leland, who was reportedly motivated by an intense competition with Henry Ford, assumed full leadership of Cadillac in 1904, and with his son Wilfred by his side, he firmly established the brand's reputation for quality. Among the excellent luxury cars being produced in America at the time, including Packard, Logier, McFarlane, and Pierce Arrow, Cadillac led the field, making the top 10 in overall U.S. auto sales every year from 1904 to 1915. By 1909, William C. Durant had assembled Buick and Oldsmobile as cornerstones of his new General Motors Corporation, founded the year before. By the end of July, he'd persuaded Wilfred Leland to sell Cadillac for $4.5 million in GM stock. Durant kept the Lelands on in their management position, however, giving them full responsibility for automotive production. 3 years later, Cadillac introduced the world's first successful electric self-starter, developed by Charles F. Kettering. Its pioneering V8 engine was installed in all Cadillac models in 1915. Over the years, Cadillac maintained its reputation for luxury and innovation. In 1954, for example, it was the first automaker to provide power steering and automatic windshield washers as standard equipment on all its vehicles. Though the brand was knocked out of its top-of-the-market position in the 1980s by the German luxury automaker Mercedes-Benz, it sought to reestablish itself during the following decades and remains a leader in the luxury car market. On July 29th in 1914, in the early hours of the morning, Nicholas II of Russia and his first cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, began a frantic exchange of telegrams regarding the newly erupted war in the Balkan region and the possibility of its escalation into a general European war. One day prior, Austria-Hungary had declared war on Serbia 1 month after the assassination in Sarajevo of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie by Serbian nationalists. In the wake of the killings, Germany had promised Austria-Hungary its unconditional support in whatever punitive action it chose to take towards Serbia, regardless of whether or not Serbia's powerful ally, Russia, stepped into the conflict. By the time an ultimatum from Vienna to Serbia was rejected on July 25th, Russia, defying Austro-German expectations, had already ordered preliminary mobilization to begin, believing that Berlin was using the assassination crisis as a pretext to launch a war to shore up its power in the Balkans. The relationship between Nicholas and Wilhelm, the two grandsons of Britain's Queen Victoria, had long been a rocky one. Though Wilhelm described himself as Victoria's favorite grandson, the The great queen, in turn, warned Nicholas to be careful of Wilhelm's mischievous and unstraightforward proceedings. Victoria did not invite the Kaiser, who described to her prime minister as a hot-headed, conceited, and wrong-headed young man, to her Diamond Jubilee celebration in 1897, nor her 80th birthday 2 years later. Tsar Nicholas himself commented in 1902 after a meeting with Wilhelm, quote, "He's raving mad," unquote. Now, however, the two cousins stood at the center of the crisis that would soon escalate into the First World War. In this serious moment, I appeal to you to help me. Tsar Nicholas wrote to the Kaiser in a telegram sent at 1 o'clock on the morning of July 29th. An ignoble war has been declared to a weak country. The indignation in Russia, shared fully by me, is enormous. I foresee that very soon I shall be overwhelmed by the pressure forced upon me and be forced to take extreme measures which will lead to war. This message crossed with one from Wilhelm to Nicholas, expressing concern about the effect of Austria's declaration in Russia and urging calm and consideration as a response. After receiving the Tsar's telegram, Wilhelm cabled back, "I share your wish that peace should be maintained, but I cannot consider Austria's action against Serbia an ignoble war. Austria knows by experience that Serbian promises on paper are wholly unreliable. I understand its action must be judged as trending to get full guarantee that the Serbian promises shall become real facts. I therefore suggest that it would be quite possible for Russia to remain a spectator of the Austro-Serbian conflict without involving Europe in the most horrible war she ever witnessed." Though Wilhelm assured the Tsar that the German government was working to broker an agreement between Russia and Austria-Hungary, he warned that if Russia were to take military measures against Austria, war would be the result. The telegram exchange continued over the next few days as the two men spoke of their desire to preserve peace, even as their respective countries continued mobilizing for war. On July 30th, the Kaiser wrote to Nicholas, "I have gone to the utmost limits of the possible in my efforts to save peace. Even now, you can still save the peace of Europe by stopping your military measures." The following day, Nicholas replied, "It is technically impossible to stop our military preparations, which were obligatory owing to Austria's mobilization. We are far from wishing for war. As long as the negotiations with Austria on Serbia's account are taking place, my troops shall not make any provocative action. I give you my solemn word for this." But by that time, things had gone too far. Emperor Franz Joseph had rejected the Kaiser's mediation offer, saying it came too late, as Russia had already mobilized and Austrian troops were already marching on Serbia. The German ambassador to Russia delivered an ultimatum that night: halt the mobilization within 12 hours, or Germany would begin its own mobilization, a step that would logically proceed to war. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon on August 1st, in Berlin, no reply had come from Russia. At a meeting with Germany's civilian and military leaders, Chancellor Theobald Bethmann von Hallwig and General Erich von Falkenhayn, Kaiser Wilhelm, agreed to sign the mobilization orders. That same day, in his last contribution to what were dubbed the Willie Nicky telegrams, Tsar Nicholas pressed the Kaiser for assurance that his mobilization did not definitely mean war. Wilhelm's response was dismissive. He is quoted as saying, "I yesterday pointed out to your government the way by which alone war may be avoided. I have been obliged to mobilize my army. Immediate, affirmative, clear, and unmistakable answer from your government is the only way to avoid endless misery. Until I have received this answer, alas, I am unable to discuss the subject of your telegram. As a matter of fact, I must request to you immediately order your troops on no account to commit the slightest act of trespassing over our frontiers." Unquote. Germany declared war on Russia that same day. On July 29th in 1921, Adolf Hitler becomes the leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Under Hitler, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party, grew into a mass movement and ruled Germany as a totalitarian state from 1933 to 1945. Hitler's early years did not seem to predict his rise as a political leader. Born on April 20th in 1889 in Braunau am in Austria, he was a poor student and never graduated from high school. During World War I, he joined a Bavarian regiment of the German army and was considered a brave soldier. However, his commanders felt he lacked leadership potential and never promoted him beyond corporal. Frustrated by Germany's defeat in the war, which left the nation economically depressed and politically unstable, Hitler joined a fledgling organization called the German Workers' Party in 1919. Founded earlier that same year by a small group of men, including locksmith Anton Drexler and journalist Karl Harrer, the party promoted German pride and anti-Semitism and expressed dissatisfaction with the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the peace settlement that ended the war and required Germany to make numerous concessions and reparations. Hitler soon emerged as the party's most charismatic public speaker and attracted new members with speeches blaming Jews and Marxists for Germany's problems and espousing extreme nationalism and the concept of an Aryan master race. On July 29, 1921, Hitler assumed leadership of the organization, which by then had been renamed the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party. In 1923, Hitler and his followers staged the Beer Hall Putsch in Munich, a failed takeover of the government in Bavaria, a state in southern Germany. In the aftermath of this event, Hitler was convicted of treason and sentenced to 5 years in prison, but spent less than a year behind bars, during which time he dictated the first volume of Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, his political autobiography. The publicity surrounding the Beer Hall Putsch and Hitler's subsequent trial turned him into a national figure. After his release from jail, he set about rebuilding the Nazi Party and attempting to gain power through the democratic election process. In 1929, Germany entered a severe economic depression that left millions of people unemployed. The Nazis capitalized on this situation by criticizing the ruling government and began to win elections. In the July 1932 elections, they captured 230 out of 608 seats in the Reichstag, or German parliament. In January of 1933, Hitler was appointed German Chancellor, and in March of that year, his Nazi government assumed dictatorial powers. The Nazis soon came to control every aspect of German life, and all other political parties were banned. Under Hitler's evil and unrighteous rule, 6 million Jews were placed in concentration camps and continued their eternity. The Nazi Party was outlawed, and many of its top officials were convicted of war crimes. It is believed that Hitler continued his eternity on April 30th, 1945, via suicide, shortly before Germany's surrender. On July 29th in 1958, the United States Congress passes legislation establishing the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, a civilian agency responsible for coordinating America's activities in space. NASA has since sponsored space expeditions, both human and mechanical, that have yielded vital information about the solar system and universe. It has also launched numerous Earth-orbiting satellites that have been instrumental in everything from weather forecasting to navigation to global communications. NASA was created in response to the Soviet Union's October 4th, 1957 launch of its first satellite, Sputnik 1. The 183-pound basketball-sized satellite orbited the Earth in 98 minutes. The Sputnik launch caught Americans by surprise and sparked fears that the Soviets might also be capable of sending missiles with nuclear weapons from Europe to America. Our country has always prided itself at being at the forefront of technology. The Sputnik 1 was all it took to engender an immediate response from our country, signaling the start of the U.S.-Soviet space race. On November 3rd in 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2, which carried a dog named Laika. In December, America attempted to launch a satellite of our own called Vanguard, but it exploded shortly after takeoff. On January 31st, 1958, things went better with Explorer 1, the first U.S. satellite to successfully orbit the Earth. In July of that year, Congress passed legislation officially establishing NASA from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics and other government agencies and confirming the country's commitment to winning the space race. In May of 1961, our 35th president, John F. Kennedy, declared that America should put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. On July 20th in 1969, NASA's Apollo 11 mission achieved that goal and made history when astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to set foot on the moon, famously declaring, quote, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," unquote. NASA has continued to make great advances in space exploration since the first moonwalk, including playing a major part in the construction of the International Space Station. We also remember the crews of the Challenger Space Shuttle in 1986 and the Columbia Space Shuttle in 2003. And all other NASA employees and humans in general who have strived to place our awesome human race at the forefront of universal exploration and domination. I will always remember their contributions as they continue their eternities. All information documented and divulged on this audio file can be verified on History.com.